Cynthia, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Aloha. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to join you today and share some knowledge.
I am smiling ear to ear. I'm like on the edge of my seat. Well, I'm sitting on my floor, but whatever. I'm like leaning into my computer, like just so ready for this. Everyone, Cynthia is amazing. She is a world champion. She's a sprinter. She's a mom. She's a carnivore. She lives in Hawaii. She's vibrant, beautiful. Like she's like all the things. And I just feel she has such an important message for all of the female athletes out there who want to perform at a high level and who also just want to be strong and confident for life. And Cynthia, how old are you again?
I'm 47 and a half, so I'll be 48 next year.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And you have no shame saying your age. And
Oh,
I
I'm proud
find
of
it
it.
right. And I find that so interesting. I'm not either. I really don't care if people know how old I am, but it seems like a lot of women really shy away from that. And I just find you so inspirational and you're like goals for me when I'm older because I know how powerful the human body is. And just watching you train at the level you do, also recover and nourish yourself at the level you do, there is so much hope. And it just really reminds me of how amazing and adaptive the human body is. So I just want you to get into your story of when you returned back into competitive sprinting when you got in your 40s, because from what I understand, you took some time off for a while.
I ran in high school in New York, and I was recruited to run track at University of North Carolina Wilmington Division One schools, Colonial Athletic Conference. And I ran track there. I was all East Coast. The 500 was actually my specialty, although of course the 400 as well. And then I thought, well, I'm all East Coast, but I didn't make it to nationals, so probably I'm not good enough to go to the Olympics or anything like that. Even though I was, top five in the East Coast. Yeah, so I ran track at University of North Carolina Wilmington. I thought, well, okay, I was top five in the East Coast, but probably I should just pursue career and that sort of thing. I never thought, I would compete again. Never thought it. So I basically didn't run for 20 years. I jogged a couple times with friends around the park and that sort of thing, but I left competition. I left training hard. I left strength training, all of it. And I had three children. And so when I turned 40, my daughter, who we just saw, um, she asked me, she was 11, she said, Mom, I want to run track in college like you did. And I realized that all my stories of being, the positivity of being a female athlete were resonating with her. And so she was 11 and she was already wanting the experience that I had because I had such a great experience. I always tell people, like, if you can even walk on a college team, the benefits of, um, tutoring and meals and things like that that come to athletes are really make you a more successful student as well. So she was basically listening to all my great stories about being a college athlete, and she was like, I think I want to try this too. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go to the track and run a 400 and see where we're at. So we both ran. We ran about a minute and 30 seconds, which is not terribly fast. um, I thought I was going to die. I crawled across the finish line. It hurt my body so much. Um, and so I started from there. And basically, I just started showing up. I started showing up 2 times a week at first. And then I started showing up 3 times a week. And I would just do a workout with my high school kids I was coaching, or I would just, try some workouts that I knew myself. And my body hurt. It hurt like a lot. It felt like my bones were moving back together because, as we know, having three kids, I had them all naturally. My bones did move. They moved, my pelvis bones moved apart. And so I felt like the physical pain of like my bones coming back together. And it was really hard. So I think a lot of people sometimes at this point see my profile or something like that and they think, oh, it's just always been easy for her. She's always been just genetically gifted. And I'm telling you right now, no, that's not the case. What I did is I learned what it was going to take for me to be a world champion. The guy that my coach that coached me, he wasn't coaching me at first. He saw me run at a local track meet and he sent me a message one Sunday night and said, I think you can be a world champion in the 400. And I laughed because this is like maybe a year into it, and I was still, not at any kind of, national or international level. And but getting there, I was dropping my time. I was about 66, then I dropped to 61 seconds, but from 1 minute and 30. So that was a good, significant drop. But I was still not there. And so he said, I think you could be a world champion. And I was like, oh, ha ha ha, are you drunk? And so he said, no, no, I'm serious. So I went down the road of what do I do to make sure that I can do this at this level, like you said, because the recovery is very important as well. And I had started studying under my mentor, Charles Poliquin, who anybody who has an interest in finding out what to do to be a champion, you can just even Google his name. And there are several podcasts that are out there, one with Tim Ferriss, one with Brian Rose, and another one that he gave for like a corporate group. And all three of those are a good starting point because he has a lot of information that he shares in those podcasts. But I got to study under Charles directly, who also believed I could be a world champion and was very supportive of me. And so I learned basically what people won't learn again for 30 more years. The way I say that is because Charles always said it takes 30 years for the research to catch up. So if something comes out in medical discoveries, it's going to take 30 years for it to hit the medical textbooks and get to the doctors that are learning it. They they do sometimes keep up with the publications, of course, but it's not going to hit those textbooks for 30 years. And so basically, Charles taught me how to use epigenetics, which is the changing of our genetic expression. I'll explain that in a second, in order to achieve success. So basically, people will say, oh, I'm overweight because it's in my genetics. And yes, that's actually true that your DNA changes if your parent overeats before they conceive you. Particularly in mice models, it's the male, the father, that dictates whether or not a child will be obese. So that being said, you can change your genetic expression. You can change how your genes express themselves through food and environment. And so I did that. I learned that. And not only did I achieve my goal of becoming a world champion, but I ran faster in that race than I did in college. And that is not supposed to happen. It's not
What
at
was
all.
the time?
At,
What was the new
at 40,
time?
at age 43. So, so I ran 57 seconds and indoors, which is slower than outdoors. Um,
So
and
57-second 400-meter.
yes, so I ran 57 and then I
Wow.
ran, yeah, so basically I ran 57 outdoor, 58.1 indoor, which is right there on the border. And I had run 58.5, something like that in college. So if you know sprints, so you know like point 0.1 is a big difference. And I ran a 57.5 outdoor and outdoor in college, I ran 56. So I didn't quite get there, but I kind of took a break after that and didn't pursue that. Um, However, I can tell you that at age 47, if I were to put my mind to it, I firmly believe I could actually probably run a 56. So I have a lot of things I'm juggling. I don't think I'll do that, but if I wanted to, I feel that our bodies are made that we can push that envelope and we can achieve that. So I love to be an inspiration to others who think, oh, my knees are achy, my hips hurt, it's too late for me. Guess what? My hips hurt too. My knees were achy too when I first started, but I slowly, gradually got back into it because I understood what it's, how to manipulate the body, like you said, in order to achieve those goals.
Wow. So everyone, a 57-second 400-meter, just go give that a try. Like go to the track after you listen to this, or maybe run your 400-meter while you're listening to this and see if you can get anywhere close to that, because that is insane. Now, I'm curious. So with the whole epigenetics, we're changing our lifestyle, our nutrition, our training. What were like the top three big rocks you changed in your training and nutrition to get to this level in your 40s?
Okay, top three. One, I learned very early on from my mentor that red meat is a very important key to nutrition. Unfortunately, like the medical industry, the nutrition and dietitian industry is also behind on research, and they're led by research that's funded by big um, food companies. So, for instance, I have an Olympic athlete that I work with. So, I'm a metabolic practitioner. I was certified under my mentor, Charles, to do basically what he also did for me. Um, so, I assess people's metabolics and help them with what supplements to take and what nutrition to have, particular for each individual. So, as a metabolic practitioner, I work with Olympian athletes as well. And one of my Olympians was telling me that they went to Penn State and they didn't know a lot about nutrition, but they were suspicious when the head nutritionist, who ran the whole nutrition program, educating all the other nutritionists, told them that they needed Pop Tarts because they were athletes and they needed sugar. And they also need Gatorade with the sugar. He asked for Gatorade without the sugar. They told him no, he needed to have the sugar. You need to eat the sugar. So it turns out that Pop Tarts is owned by Kellogg's, and she was on the board of directors for Kellogg's. So it's just straight line between. It's not even easy. It's not even suspicious. It's like right there in front of our faces. But a lot of people don't realize that. So then she's teaching all the other nutrition professors to teach their students. So it's no wonder that we have all of these nutritionists out there and registered dietitians that are saying, something like paleo or carnivore or keto is a restrictive diet, and that athletes need to have a balanced diet. Like this is, balanced for them. And also, yeah, maybe carbohydrates aren't the enemy, but what are the quality of carbohydrates and what is the timing of it? So we can get into that, but what I'm saying is that basically the information out there is not good. And so by doing my own information, my own research, I was able to find out what foods and what nutrition, could help me achieve that level. And red meat for sure is one of them because it's vilified by these industries. However, I have seen time and time again the benefits because it's full of nutrients, B12, folate, iron, zinc, all of these things, carnosine, all these things. If you look at heart health, like if you go to PubMed, which is the biggest research, uh, medical research article database, and you put in heart healthy nutrients or heart healthy amino acids, you'll find, okay, say carnitine, and then you'll look up which food has the highest carnitine, and it's red meat. You'll look at iron, which foods has the highest iron, red meat. It just keeps coming back to red meat. And so um, wild caught red meats, wild hunted like elk, deer, really great for the nutrition profile, but as well grass fed beef, that sort of thing. So red meat's number one. Number two is supplements. A lot of people out there will say you don't need supplements if you're eating the right food, but I can tell you as an athlete and even as a young female athlete, you probably need supplements. Unfortunately, the food that we have today is not as nutrient dense as the food we had in the 70s, even. So the same apple from 1975 does not have the same nutrients in it as today. Why? Because our soil is over farmed and the nutrients aren't in the soil. It's being sprayed. There are way more chemicals in our environment that are infiltrating our soil. So unfortunately, I don't believe that that even teenage athletes can get the nutrients they actually need from just food these days. Not to mention the popularity of processed foods, especially with teenagers. And then, so supplements is number two. Number three, training wise, I would say consistency slash not being afraid to give it your all. So I think that a lot of people give it maybe 60% or 70%. But I think showing up every day to just give it your all, it's something that comes with practice and time. It's probably not going to happen the first couple months, but as you keep consistently showing up, being willing to, I knew when I showed up at the track with my coach at 8:30 in the morning, I was probably going to end up laying on the track at the end of practice because he pushed me hard enough that I couldn't even walk anymore. And how could I do that at my age in my 40s? But I could. because I just kept getting stronger every time I showed up. So maybe consistency is the underlying factor there. But yeah, those would be the top three, although there's many other that fall into that, like sleep is huge, but that goes back to supplements again. A lot of people are deficient in what they need to properly fall asleep and stay asleep all night and have deep sleep. So I would fall back on that again, supplements.
So, as far as the supplements, what nutrients are female athletes in general deficient in and they need to consider supplementation?
Yes. Okay. So female athletes in general or teenage female athletes?
Let's go with teenage female athletes.
Okay. So my daughter, when I noticed her hormones start changing, and that was probably around that same time, 11, 12. um, she would, it would, I always tell parents, like, if you find yourself in the position where you're asking yourself, what is happening right now? Because all of a sudden things were fine 2 minutes ago, but now you're like, what's happening? Why is she acting like this? That's a good indication that hormones are in play. And that is greatly related to insulin response. So the more sugar your teenager has, the worse their hormone response is going to be. As well, related, teenage acne does not have to happen. I flat out, I remember in one of my first classes with my mentor, Charles, I asked him, like, are teenagers destined for acne? And he said, absolutely not. Teenagers do not have to have acne. It is dairy and sugar. If they eliminate dairy and sugar, they will not have acne. And that is because the dairy has to do with inflammation and feeding certain bacteria, and the bacteria is coming out of the face. So this is a bacteria issue. Um, as well, PCOS, which creates acne around the mouth, is a huge issue I'm seeing in teenage girls right now. And it's becoming more and more abundant, which is crazy to me that they're dealing with PCOS at such a young age. And PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it has to do with hormone imbalance, and it's sugar related. So here we have these nutritionists telling us athletes need sugar, and then we have these poor girls who are having horrible hormone swings. They're having cramps, they're having moods, they're having PCOS, and we're doing them a great disservice by pushing this sugar. So I would say um, the biggest thing I found helped with my daughter is that I would send her to her room with a protein shake, and it was whey protein. I doubled the scoop, so it was about 40 grams of protein. And I sent her to her room with protein shake. If she came out at about 6 to 8 minutes, she was still uh, Jekyll or Hyde. I don't know which one's which. Hyde, which one's the monster? She was still the monster. But if she came out about 10 minutes later, when that protein had a chance to regulate her hormones and that blood sugar response, she was a different person. She was like, "Wow, I don't know why I was acting like that." And so then we basically preemptively gave her the protein shakes consistently so that that never happened. And I can tell you it made a huge difference. By the way, she's 6 feet tall as well. She's about 5'11" and a half or 3/4, so almost 6 feet tall. So she grew well as too by having those nutrients and supplements. So one would be the protein for sure. I use whey protein by ATP Labs. And it does feed bacteria, the whey protein as well. So you want to make sure you have a good balance of gut bacteria. And if you think you might not, like it causes some bloating or something like that at first, then you would take a probiotic with it just to flood that good bacteria. Excuse me. The second thing would be magnesium. Um, Most athletes are magnesium deficient, so this would be for any age or any even male athletes. So magnesium, and there's about 30 different types of magnesium. So you want to have magnesium glycinate for a nervous system response and a recovery. There are other different types, like magnesium L-threonate is good for cognition and winding down at night, because it's the only one that crosses the blood-brain barrier. So number two would be magnesium. Go 1 second. Yeah, tickle on my throat.
So magnesium glycinate is definitely a game changer. And I take some at night, and I used to suffer from insomnia, and I just couldn't calm down, and bringing the magnesium glycinate into the picture helped tremendously. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to get magnesium glycinate within the foods you're eating too, which is why a lot of girls do need to consider supplementation.
Yeah, magnesium is richest in dark leafy greens. However, unfortunately, a lot of those dark leafy greens are full of heavy metals. They're full of lead, they're full of nickel, and then you introduce toxins, and then you're carrying toxins, and you have to detoxify. So it becomes a really terrible cycle to just get it as well. If you're eating a lot of raw leafy greens like spinach, spinach smoothies are a big one. I know so many people who have done their morning smoothie with raw spinach, almond butter, maybe some fruit, that sort of thing. And you have oxalates from spinach, which is very high, oxalates from the almonds, oxalate from the almond milk. That's another one they do with it. And then they end up with kidney stones. So those oxalates will 100% cause kidney stones. I've seen it happen from that particular protein, or not protein, but smoothie combination over and over. So the amount of oxalate rich greens that you would have to intake would basically increase your toxins and give you kidney stones. So I recommend instead, proper supplementation. And a note on that, of course, I work with Olympians and myself, I'm drug tested all the time. So I'm a clean sport athlete. I'm very, very adamant about that, especially with others. There's nothing worse than showing up to a race and your competition's, been doping and they end up getting busted later and then you already lost the medal to them. Sometimes they re-give it to you, but sometimes they don't because of the timing. So it's just really unfair. And so, clean sport athlete. So I use only Informed Sport approved products, which is ATP Labs or NSF certified, which my preference for that is Designs for Sport. So I only use those for my clients. Nutridyne as well has clean supplements that I use for some of my clients, but those two, ATP Labs and Designs for Sport, are my preference. So magnesium would be the other thing, and then yeah, I think those would be like my top two because the other thing is that most teenage girls are protein deficient, and they're also they just not to mention the girls out there because I have a daughter who's 18. I know they're on TikTok and they're promoting not eating. They're promoting anorexia, which is horrifying, as this is the ideal body type instead of a strong girl. So I love seeing strong girl examples. And so they're not eating because of that, or they're not eating because they're just lazy. They're just going through their day at school. I can't tell you how many girls I coach on the track team who, they show up to the track meet or to practice and they say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I didn't." Well, when's the last time you ate? Well, I guess maybe I ate a bite of oatmeal for breakfast, but then I forgot to eat lunch and then I didn't eat after school. Like we hear this all the time. So fueling, yes, that's for the first step as as a teenage athlete. But two, making sure you get that protein in.
I am such a huge fan of protein, especially for that hormonal balance and that steady mood, that regulation. And you'll find this funny. I have a family friend and he wears a glucose monitor. And when he eats like Lucky Charms or Starburst, like it just shoots up. And then he gets like really like angry at all of us. And I'm like, it's because you're like going through these like crazy up and downs. And it really does affect you. And I think everyone should really think about, what they're being told online. And, it's not to say like, don't like have a brownie like once in a while. Like, we're not saying restrict or do any of that, but just pay attention. And that's kind of my next question, Cynthia, because in the past, I've had several dietitians on this podcast, and I've had them say, eat your vegetables, have spinach, have almond milk, have your tons of carbohydrates, pasta dinners. What do you say to people who are like, well, who the heck do I pay attention to? Do they have to like discover it for themselves? And what should they be like analyzing within their own bodies? Should they be tracking certain things like glucose, blood pressure, blood work, like energy levels? Like, how do people figure out what nutrition is best for their sport performance?
Gosh, that is, yeah, that's a good question. So you can have our bodies are absolutely amazing machines. So you can be carbohydrate adapted as an athlete, and there are some athletes that I've seen, particularly of Asian descent, who do better carbohydrate adapted. That means they're using carbohydrate as fuel. The mistake that a lot of people make is they think that, especially with dietitians and nutritionists, is that they are taught that all athletes need to be carbohydrate fueled, and that's because that's the quickest way to get the glycogen, and that's glycogen is what gives you your your ATP phase of power. And if you're a power athlete, you absolutely have to have all of these carbohydrates. What happens is, one, not everyone should be carbohydrate adapted. In fact, I would say that most people shouldn't be carbohydrate adapted for optimal performance. Two, when you're carbohydrate adapted, you're at certain. I mean, again, like this is about hormones. So as a teenager, you can get away with it more because your hormones are different. But as you get older, you need less and less carbohydrates. And so those are going to get stored as fat. And we see it time and again. If you just think about it, you think about people as they age and how they'll say, oh, I used to be able to get away with eating all of that pie or pizza or whatever it is, pasta. But now I'm starting to get a little pooch, in my 30s and 40s. Well, that's because they don't need that many carbohydrates. It gets stored as fat. Whereas if you are an athlete who is fat and protein adapted, so like a keto carnivore blend with, yes, carbohydrates, but maybe not 400 grams of carbohydrates like these nutritionists are recommending. Uh, they're getting maybe 75 to 100 grams of carbohydrates, plenty. So maybe they're using their protein is fueling their glycogen, and the fat is using fat for fuel, which has way more energy than actually carbohydrates. But the nutritionist will say, oh, it is not as readily available. Well, I can tell you from my experience and other athletes, Olympians that I work with, American record holders, yeah, a lot of really successful athletes that when they make that changeover to being protein and fat adapted, they have more energy that lasts longer. Remember that roller coaster you just talked about with the sugar? As an athlete, I see carbohydrate, or as athlete and coach, I see carbohydrate adapted athletes increase their sugar in the morning with, say, oatmeal or something like this. And then they have to take an energy pack a couple hours later. Then they actually need another energy pack or a granola bar. They're always having to fuel and they crash. Or if they don't eat because they're nervous, I see this a lot, they don't eat. They've only had that sugar. They crash. They don't have the sugar again because they're too nervous and they have zero energy for their race or competition. The other thing is that that roller coaster will actually increase your anxiety. So when you are fat adapted, that fat coats your myelin sheath around your nerves, and you are less nervous for your competition if you're fat adapted. It's just crazy that we're still being taught that it should only be pasta parties and only should be carbohydrate adapted. Research has shown that power athletes do not lose power when they are protein and fat adapted. They actually did a study on ketogenic gymnasts who not only got better bodies, basically their body composition improved by losing fat because they were using the fat for fuel and gaining muscle, and their performance did not falter from not intaking carbohydrates. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot. So when they say like, "Oh, what's best for you?" So somebody will say it's different for everyone. I think it's different for 10% of the population, but for 90% of the population, it should not be carbohydrate adapted, in my opinion. The other thing is that, unfortunately, women who are in their 20s are being diagnosed with autoimmune illnesses, and they go back to the sugar again. So I think it's a great disservice. Are they, these nutritionists, even in college, are they testing their ApoE genes, their genetics? Because if they have certain ApoE alleles, then they really should stay away from sugar because they don't process it well. And they're getting set up for, for all kinds of autoimmune illnesses. So yeah, I think that this sugar is good for athletes needs to go away.
Wow, that's something for everyone to think about. I was just thinking we should have protein parties instead of pasta parties. And that's the thing. And it's been nice to hear your story and then the high level athletes you've worked with that upping the protein, upping the healthy fats has improved their cognitive function and their recovery. And I'm very slow to tell people exactly what I eat, but I will say this, I have also upped protein and fat, and I said to my husband yesterday, I was like, "I literally feel like I could play a 90-minute soccer game better than when I was a college All-American." Like, my energy is just, like, piping recently, and just super alert, and it's, like, amazing when you get into that state and you're like, "Whoa, like, this world exists." And the
Yeah,
ups and
I
downs
like how
aren't
you
as crazy, you're just,
yeah.
like, energy, like, the whole time, so
I like how you put that because it's those of us who are so, such champions of the, less sugar, less carbohydrates, more protein, more fat. We are spreading this message for no other reason except that we want everyone to feel as good as we do. Like I have great energy throughout the day, and I want everyone to have that energy. I want everyone to be free of autoimmune diseases and chronic illness. Like I want this for everyone. It is my mission to make others happy through teaching them things that work. And again, like the naysayers will say, calories in, calories out, and it doesn't matter what you eat. But I've seen it both ways. I've seen one. My cousin did the calorie counting and ate snowballs for her meals all the time for like I don't even know, a couple months straight. Snowballs. They're like the gas station cakes. Okay, that's what she ate for calories in, and she became so sick and so pale. And I was like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, calories in, calories out." This is what I'm. No, you need nutrition. You need nutrients. So, yeah. The other thing about the red meat, for instance, so I eat steak an hour before I race the 400, and yeah, I'm there with my baggie of grass-fed steak already cut up, and I'm eating the steak and the macadamia nuts, usually maybe a little bit of blueberries, an hour before I run. Why? Because, again, the carnosine, which buffers fatigue, is high within the first hour of eating red meat, and it's more bioavailable than in a supplement. So this is one case in which absolutely the food is better than the supplement because they did research on that. It's like 95% more bioavailable, and I think it's because of all the other supporting nutrients in the red meat. But anyway, so I'm there eating my steak an hour before I run, and what's happening is that it gets digested so quickly in your upper stomach and upper intestines, it doesn't even reach your colon. So a lot of people think, oh, meat rots in your gut. Another myth we're told. No, it actually once you get adapted to digesting it well, you digest it so quickly that it doesn't even reach your colon, which is where you feel bloated. So on the flip side, if you're eating a bunch of grains like granola bars, that's going to weigh heavy on you. So people think, oh, how can you eat steak? That's too heavy, before you compete. And I'm like, how can you not eat steak before you compete? Because it's full of all these things that give you energy, lasting energy. You're not nervous, and it doesn't sit in your stomach. Actually, it feels very light because I'm also not eating this much pasta. I'm eating this much steak. So it's a lot less food for a lot more nutrients. And that's my experience, but it's also the experience of the Olympians I work with. Um, so it's funny when people say, where do you find your information online? It's really hard for the person who doesn't know about this to find the right answer because there are so many conflicting things. But I have like the mom of the number one NCAA female 800-meter runner right now, Michaela Rose. She sought me out in Virginia Beach a couple of years ago. Michaela was having some issues with stress fractures, blah, blah, blah. And she said, I've seen the work that you've done with the Olympians. I want you to work with my daughter. So when they know or they see what works, when you want to be the optimal athlete, you're going to go and find who's the best at everything. You're going to go find the best coach. You're going to go find the best team. You're going to go find the best resource. Who's winning? Who's the champion out there? You're going to find what they're doing. And if they're vegan and like the game changers athletes, they're all not doing well. So, just to let you know, those were not the best in the world, and they're all still not doing well. So you're going to find who's successful for a long time, and you're going to ask them questions. So I highly recommend any of the, especially the teenage female athletes, to ask a lot of questions to people who are really good at what they do. And that could be anything in life. It could be even for their jobs. Say they want to be the best TV producer or something like that. Go find who is the best TV producer and go ask ask them some questions, ask them if you can interview them, ask if you can study under them. So yeah, that's what I would say is it's hard for them to find that resource except for you need to find who's doing well, who's doing who's the best, masters athletes. What are they eating? I asked a guy that's he's 75 now, but he's 70 years old and he also was running a 57 in his 400 at 70. Okay. I interviewed him at length at one of the track meets. What is he eating? How often does he sleep? What does he do during the day? And you know what? He ate pretty much a protein. It was protein forward. He did eat some brown rice and things like that, but it was mostly like salmon, red meat, chicken. His wife cooked all his meals. He did not nap in the afternoon, so he slept really well at night, and he was busy throughout the day. But basically, I asked them, what are you doing for your to be performing at such a high level? So yeah, I guess just look at not the dietitian who's sitting behind the desk, not competing or not proving that they're stronger than in their 60s and 50s, 40s than they were before. But maybe ask who is doing this at a high level, who has this information. Yeah. So, and you can also experiment yourself. So why not try going gluten free and organic and protein forward for 2 weeks? I would say give it 2 weeks. Start eating red meat for breakfast with a handful of nuts and berries. That was his meat and nuts breakfast he coined. Red meat, handful of blueberries, handful of nuts. Peanuts are not nuts, by the way, they're beans. So maybe stick with macadamia nuts, walnuts, and almonds to start with, right? So maybe your listeners want to try that for 2 weeks and see how they feel throughout their day, see their energy change. And I can tell you that that energy shift will sell them, and they'll never go back to eating cereal or oatmeal or any of that for breakfast again.
Well, that was a lot to digest, no pun intended. So I recommend everyone. I'm going to link some resources and studies. There's plenty of them out there. So just read, do your research, and just sit on what we're talking about. Sit on what Cynthia just mentioned. And nutrition is truly a journey, and it takes a while to figure out how to really optimize your energy, and you have to really listen to your body. So I encourage you to just do your research and just try for yourself. Now let's shift gears to the training side. I know you're a big fan of sprinting, just like I am, and just high intensity, max efforts. And it's just so beneficial for our young female athletes, no matter what sport you play, whether you're track, soccer, even volleyball, tennis, all female athletes need to sprint, and they need to do so for life. So let's talk about why sprinting is awesome for sport and for life.
There's basically a vibe out there that you shouldn't say anything bad about what someone else is doing. For instance, so I shouldn't bash, on the vegan diet because to each his own, right? But I'm going to say vegan diets create such terrible health issues that I do speak up against them because I care. So the same thing with exercise type. Unfortunately, endurance trained athletes, even from a young age, girls that run cross country and do so at such intensity, their mileage is so high that they lose their periods, is not healthy. That is not honoring these female athletes. So what I've found through my research, and it's not just because I sprint and I love it, if endurance training was better for my health, I would be a marathon runner because I follow what's best for longevity. This is my specialty. It's what I research. What I found is that even from an early age, but especially as we get older, as a female athlete, the higher intensity short bursts are what our body wants for exercise. It actually takes care of our heart health better. I'm sure somebody's known another person who had a heart attack in their 40s, but they ran marathons, and but they were so healthy. They drank uh, spinach smoothies and ran marathons. They were so healthy. So this, unfortunately, it causes cardiac remodeling, which can be detrimental to heart health, this endurance training. So this is one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of sprinting. The other is that, as a teenager, again, like setting up girls for already losing their periods is not good. But I have not really seen that happen with sprinting or high intensity sports, where it's just short bursts and then rest, short bursts and rest. This is what our body likes over intervals. As we age, sprinting is really important because we need to maintain muscle mass. We have two things that happen to us as females: sarcopenia and dynapenia. Sarcopenia is the loss of muscle mass, and dynapenia is the loss of muscle power. This happens very quickly as our hormones are changing around age 40. So a lot of women say, "Oh, I'm turning 40. I need a goal. I'm going to run a marathon." And I always say, rather, when you turn 40 as a female athlete, you should have the goal of running 100 meters at a master's track athlete or a master's track meet. So maybe train for the 100 meters or the 200 meters instead, because this is going to give you better hormone balance as you age. It's going to keep your muscle mass and muscle strength as you age. So, yes, resistance training is a huge part of that. If you're 40 or over, you should be doing strength training at least 3 to 4 times a week, in my opinion. You can cycle on and off. That's another story. Periodization of strength training is really important, as well as running training. But having those sprints in, and it's easy to start. I wrote a book about it because so many people ask me, how do I start sprinting? So I wrote a book, Fast Over 40. It's very small. It's like a manual. It has tons of workouts in the back, as well as a dynamic warm up for sprinting. Because what you don't want to do is go out today and sprint your hardest and pull a hamstring. So I recommend people do is they start walking up a hill and then slowly getting faster, because that will actually force your foot into the dorsiflex position that you need all those ankle and tendons to be strong for when you start sprinting. Also, running on sand at the beach is a good way to start. Jogging on sand, walking on sand to strengthen your feet, because you go all the way up the kinetic chain to your hamstrings, up to your posterior chain, your back, and all of that gets strengthened through those activities. So it's better for hormone. I give so many reasons for sprinting, but better for hormone balance. It actually increases BDNF greater than endurance training or aerobic training. BDNF is brain derived neurotropic factor, and that is a fertilizer for your brain. It keeps your brain active, it keeps your brain plastic, neuroplasticity. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it's basically when your brain stays active and wards off things like Alzheimer's and dementia. So that is increased so much more through high intensity work and sprinting than through aerobic training. So I always joke, sprinting makes you smarter. So better hormone balance, BDNF. It actually helps you sleep better because of the way things are released, the catecholamines that are released. You burn fat longer after you finish sprinting. So they found the same amount of fat or more fat was burned in some research, some same, some more, with sprinting for 20-minute intervals for 20 minutes, as over an hour to over an hour of endurance training. So you get the same amount of fat burned and better body composition through sprinting than endurance training. So there are a lot of reasons why I'm a big proponent of sprinting, and I think it's easy for everyone to do. You can do it on your street. You can do it on the grass. You don't need to join a gym to do it. It's a full body workout. So proper sprinting technique. I go over that too in several different places, YouTube and that sort of thing. I interview my coach about it on YouTube. But proper sprinting technique, your chest is out, your shoulders are back and rolled down, your hands are coming all the way up outside your eyeballs and all the way back to your pocket. And so when you look at that range of motion, you're using all of your shoulders, your back, your core, your biceps, your triceps. So of course I strength train for all of that, but the strongest sprinters are strong in their upper body as well as their lower body. So you're getting a full body workout and more bang for your buck than if you're doing some long, slow distance. Those are just a handful of the reasons.
Yeah, just a handful of benefits. I mean, there's so many, and the one I'm just most excited about is the cognitive benefits, and you just feel more awake and alert after a sprint workout. And I hear that from my athletes as well. They're never tired or feel bogged down. They're just excited. They're energized, and it is definitely one of the most intense coordinated things the human body can do, and all muscles are firing, and there's no better feeling And I was just thinking of a book. I don't know if you've heard of this book. It's called The Brain That Changes Itself.
No, I haven't heard of that
It
one.
it's a book, written by a medical doctor. I forget his name, but he talks about just doing different exercises and putting your body through new challenges as you age to reduce the chance of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. And it's super fascinating and just a lot of research behind it. So I'm going to leave that in the caption below. I think even young female athletes should read it. Yes, we love sport performance. We love improving speed times or performance on the soccer field and scoring goals. But I just love that this is just useful for being a life athlete. And I think that's such a good message for our young girls. And I love what you're doing to just empower. I know you have daughters and you're just doing such great work. Now, we're going to shift gears to something that just recently came up, and it's been going on for quite a bit, but it just came up in my world over here. But I wrote an article about empowering female athletes a few weeks ago, and someone commented on the blog and said, "Hey, like, I love the work that you're doing and the message, and I love that you're just really standing up for female athletes, but is all this useless with males starting to compete in female sports?" And my jaw dropped. Like, I didn't know what to make of the comment because I had never really thought about it until it came up, and I haven't responded yet because I'm not one to, like, respond quickly to something like this. I have to really wrestle with topics and ask questions, and that's also why I wanted to bring you on, Cynthia, because you've experienced this firsthand at a high level. Your daughter has also experienced it at the high school level. And I think when it actually happens to you, you realize, oh, this is actually happening. While the rest of us, even myself included, we're just kind of like ignoring, like, oh, nothing's really going on here. But what are your thoughts on all this and just the future of female sports? Is it like doomsday, like everyone's saying? Is this useless? Like, what are we fighting for?
Well, I really want to say, Erica, that I'm actually a really big fan of your work as well. And I know I actually interviewed you before because I was like, I found you and I was like, you know what? This girl knows what's up. You know, she knows she's empowering these young girls. She's teaching them that they need to fuel. She's teaching them that they need to strength train and not all this other BS that goes on in especially in club soccer. I feel like club soccer, these girls are overtraining all year round. They're not paying attention to their nutrition or their, you know, their protein intake. Like I just really thought you consistently nail it with your information. I love your book. So I am as well a fan of you. And the one thing that stands out about your work is that you are honoring the female. You are honoring that there is a difference between the female and the male. And so while all of us think, well, yeah, of course, that's common sense, this is being overrun by this ideology that everyone can be anything. So I can be, you know, I start identifying as a cat, or my daughter tells me that there's some people that identify as chairs or clouds now, and they call themselves cloud self. And you know what? Sure, if they want to identify that as that, you know, that's their feeling, then yeah, like, you know, do we let them feel this way, or, you know, do we think that maybe that's not going to be beneficial for them? I don't know. But I'm just saying that this is the world we're in, where this is, I think that kids, especially in middle school, are who are already going through these hormone changes and trying to self-identify. They're trying to find themselves. They're trying to find where are their roots, who are they, and they're getting pushed into um, thinking that they can identify one way or another when you know, there are actual biological distinctions between females and males. Now, I have a friend who is a male who identifies as female, who is a runner, who would says they would never ever enter a female race as a male-bodied athlete because that would not be honoring the female. They say, you know, I would never do that to my sister. Like that would not be something that would be fair to them. So I think that It's a small amount of people that think that this is fair. And I speak up for it because I raced at one of my world championship meets in Spain against a Colombian athlete who identified as female, who was very large bodied, had very small hips, which we know the smaller hips on the male athlete makes them able to run faster and jump further and higher.
And is that
So
is that because, there's more vertical force production, like, biomechanically? Is that
yeah, that's
going on there?
biomechanics.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, that's one of the many things that give them an advantage that is not changed through hormone therapy. So if anyone looks up Lundberg, Lundberg, there's plenty of research by this scientist, especially in the military, where they have tested the differences between males who have undergone hormone replacement and surgery, so both, and they still have a physical advantage athletically over females. Now, again, to some people, this is like common sense, but to other people, they say no. A trans woman is a woman. Period. Like that's where they want to leave it because they know they won't win the biological argument. They just want to leave it that way. If that's how they feel, we have to treat them that way. If they feel like they're a cat today, then we have to treat them like a cat. If they feel like they're a cloud, we have to treat them like a cloud. So I think that this does a great disservice to biological female athletes because we will then reverse all of the advantages or the opportunities that we had since the 70s in Title IX. Title IX gave us equal opportunity to win prizes and scholarships and things like that, the same equal opportunities as men. So that's being reversed. The Biden administration currently has issued an executive order reversing Title IX. They have said we no longer we interpret this, that's their political jargon. We interpret this as including trans women. So they have redefined Title IX. What does that mean? That means now anyone who wants to identify as female gets to be in the female race. Let's just say race or soccer game, and we have to accept that that's just how they feel. So we need to respect that. And then what happens is that the top spot on the podium is taken by that male bodied athlete. And then more come, and the second place is taken, the third place is taken, and now females are being pushed out of their own sports. And so the other side will say that's not really happening. I actually, the women's couple of the women's groups that I work with, IWF and some others, they sent a press release about my story of racing this athlete and my daughter, who had to race her very first high school race here on Maui in ninth grade against a male-bodied athlete who had just come from the boys volleyball team to the girls volleyball team, gave a girl a concussion from a powerful spike, and then decided to try track and just blew everybody away. So her very first high school race against a male body athlete. So we sent a press release about our story to different publications, and the New York Times said no, we're not going to publish it, and then came out with an article 2 days later saying this doesn't really happen. There are no cases. These groups can't come out with any cases where this has actually happened. So there's something bigger going on with controlling the conversation, and people need to realize that when they're being fed information like if you take estrogen, that makes you a woman. So I had some of my athletes that I coached in high school say, well, the athlete that your daughter's racing against is a girl now because he takes estrogen. And I'm like, that's not how it works. So I think that there's a lot of information that people don't have, even though, again, most people think it's common sense, which it is. It's common sense and biology that men are faster and stronger than women. Does that mean every man is faster and stronger than every woman? Of course not. But if you are comparing equally gifted and talented athletes, the male athlete will always be stronger and faster than the woman. And that pushes women out. So is it happening? Yes, it's happening more and more. I recently boycotted the 400 meters at the World Championships and chose to try the pentathlon, which, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just started it, which was fun. It was a fun trip for me. But I boycotted the 400 because there's another athlete, an Italian athlete this time, who had just made the transition and was cleaning up in Europe, winning all the accolades, and was favored to win at the World Championships. Thank God, World Athletics came down with a decision a couple days before the World Championships that they no longer are allowing male-bodied athletes into female sports. I applaud the administration there at World Athletics because they finally are getting it. They said they stand up for female athletes and they recognize that there's a difference and they're no longer allowing this. So we are still allowing it in the United States. It's being fought out in the courts. It should not be political at all. Because if you ask any of your Democrat friends or any of your Republican friends or any of your independent friends, I bet you that 99% of them are going to agree that even though they believe everybody should be able to feel how they want to feel, that this is unfair, and it is unfair. So the work that you're doing is important because you're making that biological distinction. So girls who are listening to you are like, yeah, I am female. I celebrate that. I'm different. I'm different from a male body. So yeah, I, this is a little short snippet of my story, and I'm very, very adamant about speaking about it.
I'm sure it took some initial courage because I know a lot of people are afraid to speak on it out of fear of getting bullied or personally attacked, which I do see a lot of, which is really a shame because you're not saying like that these athletes can't do sports. You're just saying stay out of female sports. And, I've heard terms like bigot or transphobic, and I don't think that's fair at all. I think you can definitely have a conversation with someone that isn't emotional and you're not raising your voice on one another. I personally love to ask questions. I'm genuinely curious, and I would be more than happy to interview someone who completely disagrees with you, Cynthia. So if anyone disagrees, then email me. Happy to have a conversation, especially if you're a coach. Let's do it. I'm curious. And I think we need to have more of these discussions because otherwise there's no way forward. And we're not going to come to a well thought out solution for all parties involved.
Yeah,
In the end, right
exactly.
now,
We want
someone's going
everyone.
to get hurt either way. So it's like, you're trying to be inclusive, but then at the same time, you're not inclusive to female athletes. So someone's
And it's
like
taking a
excluded
psychological toll
regardless.
on them. Yeah. Oh, exactly. It's taking a psychological toll on female athletes as well. Because think about you've done everything possible to be your optimal best. You've gone through the nutrition. You're like, disciplined about what you're fueling with. You're disciplined about your training. You show up every day. You give it your best, and that best is still not good enough to win because somebody who has an advantage where they don't have to work as hard is showing up next to you. It's the same as doping. It is absolutely the same. So what happens is we have these things called myonuclei, which are the satellite cells that build our muscle fibers. And males have more of those myonuclei than females. This particularly happens during puberty with testosterone. And so what
And
that
they have
means,
bigger heart size, lung size, tidal
yeah,
volume, muscle mass. I mean, the list just goes on.
right. But
Yeah.
similar to, say, a bodybuilder that takes steroids, they increase the myonuclei so much through those hormones, through the steroids, that they always have those satellite cells to be able to create that muscle again faster later. So it's something like muscle memory, but if you've already established that muscle, it's easier for you to do it again later. As an athlete, you probably understand that, right? So when men have this abundance of myonuclei over women, they always have an advantage of creating that muscle. So oftentimes they don't have to train as hard either.
No, no,
So
let
for
me
instance,
let me just push back on that real quick. So
mhm,
even after the hormonal therapy, there's research that says that the biological male still has advantage.
yes, absolutely correct. Yeah.
No,
So even after hormone surgery, or sorry, hormone treatment and surgery, they still have an advantage, and myonuclei is one of those reasons. So it is similar. When I was saying it's kind of like doping, they still have that advantage. So um, speaking of that, though, that means if someone's doped and then they've been banned and they come back, they still also have that advantage, which is another issue. But so basically, Yeah, I have compassion for everyone involved, especially our female athletes who are being psychologically traumatized by having to step to the line or having to be in the game with these male athletes, and no one's doing the research or asking questions on what how is that affecting them. I had a mom calling me in tears because her daughter missed out on the California state championship. They only take 3 per section, and California is highly competitive. So this person was still top 10 in the nation, but didn't make it to states in their section because 2 of the 3 that went to states were male bodied athletes. And so she called me in tears because then that means that her daughter couldn't go and be seen by these college recruiters that were there. College recruiters do look at overall standings, but they also go to track meets. They go to state championships and they look at who has potential. Like they want to see with their own eyes who looks like they're going to burn out, who looks like they have a strong family base. And this is, for soccer as well. There's a lot that goes into recruitment. If a soccer player who's been doing club since they were, I don't even know, 5 years old or something, year round, and that they look like they might burn out before college or during college, that college recruiter, that college coach is not going to recruit them. There's a lot more that goes into recruiting than just the overall results. So these girls are missing out on major events. They're missing out on scholarships. They're missing out on places in the podium, like my friend Riley Barker, who is Riley Gaines Barker, who
Yeah, I
was the
know
swimmer
Riley
that had to
Gaines.
share the podium with Leah Thomas. This is unacceptable. It's happening right in front of our face. For anyone to say it's not happening, they're living in the dark. So again, it's common sense. I have compassion for everyone involved, and I want these athletes to be able to compete fairly and have this positive experience. So that Italian athlete who was going to run the 400 at World Championships, there was so much negative energy towards them because it felt unfair. It wasn't because of their life decision to identify this way. That wasn't the problem. And anyone I talked to from any country said this is not the problem. The problem is that it's unfair, and it's and they're celebrating like they worked so hard when they didn't have to work as hard as me. When my daughter was in running that race in high school, I looked at the statistics for the state of Hawaii, and I looked at the top female time at the state championship that year before, and 400 out of the 800 boys that ran the 400 meters that year. So 800 boys ran the 400 meters the same year. The top girl ran 58 seconds. 400 of those boys ran 58 seconds. So at the high school level, there's no checking hormones or anything like that. You just show up how you identify that day if you want to. And so 400 of those boys, that's quite literally a mediocre athlete. 400 out of the 800 could be a state champion. That is not okay for our female athletes. It's not teaching them to empower themselves. Hey, if you work hard, dreams come true. You can be a champion. It's crushing those dreams.
It's sad because it is happening, and I think until it it happens to you, then you just kind of ignore it, and I'm just wondering if that's why other, like, professional female athletes aren't speaking up. I know, Riley Gaines recently tweeted at, Serena Williams and Megan Rapinoe, "Hey, like, what are your thoughts on this?" And, like, I don't like being, like, pressured into, like, "Hey, you must, like, take a stance on something, and you better say something." Like, I don't like that, so, like, it's fine if they wanna keep quiet, but I think what would happen if a biological male took Megan Rapinoe's starting position in the World Cup or Alex Morgan's starting position in the World Cup, for example, they would be devastated and they would have something to say. And maybe they wouldn't say something, but I know they would be really upset about it.
Yeah.
They're not going to
So
admit that though.
recently, World Surfing League put into place a policy that allowed trans athletes, and my friend and client Bethany Hamilton, the surfer, did speak up about it. We've been talking about it for years, and she hasn't wanted to speak up. And these athletes, they have a lot to lose with these huge sponsorships. And unfortunately, the clothing companies get some of them are getting in on it, like Adidas, celebrating male athletes taking female spots. I can't stand it. So it's really it's upsetting because it's not what the majority of people feel. So, but Bethany spoke up, and like you said, she did it in question form. Like, did World Surfing League ask us what we thought about this? Who's in charge of making these decisions? Did they have research to back it up? So she did a great job. It's on her Instagram of asking these questions. And so I would say to your listeners out there, if you feel like this doesn't feel right inside, if an athlete is male bodied, standing next to you, if you feel like it's not right, but you're afraid to speak up, just start asking questions. You really can't, you can't get in trouble for asking the questions. You have to say, Coach, is this okay? And they say, well, that's what usually the coach says, this is what the administration is telling me I have to say, is it's okay. And then you say, well, who in the administration is telling you that? So I don't know. I really feel like it is brave a little bit, but in the other way, you're going to find the majority of people supporting you because common sense is on your side. And also,
Absolutely.
I have huge legal firms that I've worked with to give statements to and things like that. And there are definitely, if something happens where you get canceled or fired or something like that, there are legal repercussions for that. And it stands up under court. So I really feel that this is headed for the Supreme Court maybe in the next year or so. And once that happens, I hope that they'll follow the lead of World Athletics, who have already come to their senses and said, "All right, we acknowledge there's a difference, and this needs to stop happening." I think we're going to end up going that route, but in the meantime, yeah, don't just let it happen. Start asking questions.
I think it's always a good thing to be curious, ask questions, have these conversations where it's just a dialogue and you try to meet people with understanding. I think things get really ugly when you personally attack or you bully or you assume something about someone or you raise your voice without like really trying to understand. So,
Oh, can I touch on that real quick? Because
yep,
you did mention that too, being labeled as transphobic or something like that.
yeah.
One thing I love to teach my teenage female athletes, especially, or my athletes of any age, is that you do not need to place value in the opinions of others. So a true champion does not place value in the opinions of others. They place value in their opinion of themselves. So you know who you are. You know you're coming from a place of compassion. So just in general in life, if someone starts name calling or they make assumptions, especially in this social media world, they're making assumptions about you. They don't know you,
Yeah.
okay? And anyone who does know you knows that the place you're coming from. So I would say there's no value in the label of transphobic unless you're giving that person power to give it value. Like you're giving that person the power to hurt you. And this can go on in relationships. I just told this sweet girl friend of my daughter's, her teammate, she was crying because some parent was yelling at her because she was repping a wrestling match anyway. So she was getting yelled at by this angry parent and she was crying. And I said, "Girl, you are a state champion wrestler. What are you doing right now? Why are you giving this parent the power to make you cry?" And it's the same for maybe girls in where their boyfriends make them cry. Why are you giving that guy the power to make you cry? You have the power to stop that and make the choice not to give them value and not to place value in that insult or that hurtful thing they're saying. That's on you. So that is extremely empowering as an individual of any age to know that you are in charge of how you feel about yourself, not other people.
I think that's such an amazing message, and I think sometimes, like, us humans have the negativity bias when someone says something bad about us, it just sticks out, but that's such a good point. You have to just know who you are and empower yourself. Stay on your side of the road, focus on what you're doing and your purpose, and everything just falls into place. And, I would love to hear from everyone in the comments. I want good discourse in the comments. Research if you have it, that would be amazing. Personal attacks we're just gonna ignore or delete. But please just comment. We would love to hear from you. And again, I'm gonna hold to that. If you have a disagreement with Cynthia and you're in coaching, email me. we'll get you on. Now, Cynthia, we're going to just wrap this up. And I want you to just give female athletes just a word of wisdom as they finish their sports journey or go into a next phase in their sports journey. What is some advice you would leave them with?
Okay. Well, first of all, um, I love working with female athletes because they do have a very innate, intuitive sense of themselves. And I would say always trust your instincts as to which direction you're going. So a lot of times people don't trust their instincts and they overthink things. So I would say go with your instincts for whatever journey you're on, because women's instincts are really, really on point. And it comes from a place that's your authentic self. So maybe try to find what is your authentic self, and that authentic self is something that you're when you're making decisions, you feel good about yourself. So like you said, when you changed over to more protein, it made you feel good. So that's part of your authentic self, what's making you feel good. Recognize also what's not making you feel good. Maybe you have a work situation that drags you down. That's not honoring yourself and your authentic self. You need to find something that lights that fire in you and follow that path as well. I would say that as you're aging, make sure you're getting your strength training done and you're getting your high intensity work in, because that is also honoring your authentic self and your true self and your best self, your best version of yourself. It's never too late to learn new things. You always want to keep learning new things to keep that neuroplasticity up, which is one of the reasons also I tried the pentathlon this year, um, keeping those challenges alive. So always learn new things and stay active. Just show up consistently. I would say 3 times a week for some training, and your hormones will thank you. Your body will thank you, and then as a result, your mind will also follow. So I've worked with people all the way up to their 80s on improving. Even my parents who told me at age 75 they'll never change and it's too late, they're stuck in their habits. Guess what? They changed and they're thriving now at age 81 and 82. My dad's lifting dumbbells and, taking walks and hunting. He was up on the roof the other day. Oh my God, it's driving me crazy, but scaring me a little bit. But, they're just rocking and rolling. And I just really feel like it's never too late to be your best self. And I am the biggest cheerleader for you on that. And that's why I share my message. That's why I do what I do, is to help others.
That was so good. And everyone, please follow up with Cynthia and all of her amazing content. I have linked it in the caption below. She is such a powerhouse and just gives so much encouragement for young girls to be strong, confident, and powerful for life. So, Cynthia, thank you again. And everyone, I will see you on next week's episode.